Well, I'm Pastor Rob Bailey here at South Lake Church, and welcome as we've been continuing through the story of Joseph. And on this journey, we've seen this boy named Joseph have a dream about being bowed down by everybody to then being thrown in a cistern. From being the pride of his father to being sold into slavery. From being the manager of a house to be thrown in prison, to telling dreams, to being put in charge, to being reunited with his family. But today we're reading and going through the part of the story, seeing now Joseph being that number 2 in the land and what he did. What are things that we like doing? I really walked into those two. When it comes to life and things we do, what are things that we enjoy doing? Well, hopefully for some parents is watching and raising your children. Maybe not always, but hopefully. What are things we like doing in our lives? Watching football, relaxing. Traveling. Eating food. So far, everything we've talked about is about leisure and relaxation. What about things that we do in our lives? Are there things that we enjoy? Acting. So in order to act, you need what? Imagination, experience, talent, a script. And you also need to do what? What should you not be doing as an actor if you have a script and you have talent? What should you not do? Wing it. Just show up. You should practice and develop yourself. What are other things that we do that we enjoy? Hunting. Again, most people, including I, can't just go in the field and go shoot something. It takes talent. It takes skill. It takes development. So for those in healthcare, supporting those around you, being there for them, checking their scripts, watch what's going on. For those who are teachers, watching your students grow and develop, putting lesson plans together. That takes work, that takes discipline, it takes a lot of behind the scenes that people don't know. Even those people who work at NASA can't just shoot something up to the moon. It takes a lot of preparation behind the scenes. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that for a lot of us, we have skills that God's given us to do things. One of the verses I brought up a lot in church is Ephesians 2:10. You are his masterpiece, made to do his good works. And with those good works, we typically have things that we find passion in. And when you do something, whether it be acting or teaching, healthcare, saving lives, or just being with others, when you're doing the things that you enjoy most, how do you feel? Feel good here, feel good here, and you kind of trust what you're doing is right. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, why we're thinking about this, is that as you go into the story of Joseph now, and this is what's been hitting me hard this week, is that when you are in a place where you feel good about what you're doing and all those things, it's easy to get excited about who you are as a person. So we're going to be mixing back and forth with our reading. So Genesis chapter 47, Joseph now, being the number 2 guy, remember, he's now met his family. The famine's been going on now for over 2 years. People are running out of food. People aren't growing crops. And so as Joseph is the head leader, as he's the one in charge, the people are like, hey, Joseph, our money's gone. How do we get food? And Joseph, being the gifted individual and thinking through all these things himself, well, since your money's gone, bring me your livestock. So the things that you use to help support your family, give me those things if you don't have money. So they give all that up. But as Joseph knows, what's going to happen the following year? Another famine. But now everything that those people had to give is now Joseph's, and more importantly, Pharaoh and the government. So what they go to Joseph again, and they say, Joseph, since you've taken the years ended, next year again, we said we cannot hide the truth from you. Our money's gone, our livestock, our cattle, everything that we've had to barter and give for our life is gone. But Joseph, in his leadership and looking at this, goes, all right, we can still solve this problem. How about you give me your land and yourselves as slaves? Now the government doesn't just own all the food in the land, all the livestock in the land. They now own all the land and the people. And not to make quirks or jokes about tithing here, but you can see here with how Pharaoh worked. Was that 10% you were supposed to give back to Pharaoh with your land every year? Did you pick up what the actual percentage was? 20%. And the reason I'm bringing this up is Joseph is excited. He is the one leading, and he's making important decisions that is taking care of Pharaoh in Egypt. He's doing his job. He is relying on his talents to lead, and he's doing it. But by doing so, how does Joseph sound in that reading? Does that sound like the good, caring person we all want to be? No, he made people who were starving into slaves. And what it says here is all of Egypt became slaves to Joseph. Except who? There's two groups brought up. The priests. First off, there's the priests, who the religious section was protected from all this. But who was the other part? His family. Yeah, his family had the best land in the land. And according to what this says here, meanwhile, the Israelites settled in the region of Goshen, which is a beautiful location up on the north part of Egypt. They had acquired property. They were fruitful. They had a population that grew rapidly. So as the rest of Egypt was losing their land, in a sense losing their rights and starving, here comes God's people coming in this land and growing and developing. And you might be looking at this like, okay, so is the whole point of the message, if we trust God, we'll be great, the rest of the world is going to suffer, and things will be good. Who has Joseph not talked to at all in our reading so far on how to handle the situation? Pharaoh, but again, Pharaoh now trusts him to be his speaking point, so the other person is God. And I bring this up now to look back in our lives where we're at this moment with Joseph, is to say that when you're somebody skillful like Joseph, when a famine, when a struggle is happening in our lives, there we go, to rely on the strengths and talents that we have to get through things. Coming down here to Houston 5 years ago, we had our own disaster. Harvey. I had no idea how to lead in Harvey. How many people here were prepared and knew how to handle leading through a hurricane? Not many of us. And if you are, and that, it's okay to say yes, because I'm thankful there's people here who were able to lead through that, who were prepared for that. But for a lot of us, we had to act and do what we needed to do. And if we're honest with ourselves, when we needed to act, for the most part, did we look inward to how we're going to handle things? Did we spend time praying to God and just, Lord, you trust this? I can say that I was focused more on, okay, Rob, what do I need to do right now? 2 years ago, as Southlake was preparing to be our own church down here in League City, again, I was asked to lead and develop. There are certain things that I really love being a pastor. There are certain things that I think I do very well. I like how I worded that, I think. But there are other things that I struggle with. And it's easy when you're struggling, it's easy to feel like you can't handle everything. You go back inside to rely on yourself to deal with it. And as I shared, for those who don't know, our board met yesterday to look towards planning for next year. I shared with them, I now understand how 2 years ago, there are certain decisions that I made that were very emotional. But why? Because I'm an emotional person. That's who I am. I did what I did. Just like how Joseph acted the way he did, he acted as the leader that he was meant to be. But where the fault lies here is, do you take time to spend to look to God to lead through a famine? And I bring this up to you because as we read how Joseph acted during this time, he made sure people were taken care of. But how do you think the people felt about Pharaoh and God's people? Seeing how they were growing and developing, seeing how they were prospering, and they were selling all their goods. Not well. And I mentioned last week, as Joseph's family came to Egypt, this will start something that 400 years later we'll hear the phrase, a time came when Pharaoh did not know Joseph. And God's people will be the ones who are then enslaved. A lot that sets those verses up in the beginning of Exodus is happening right now. And it's easy to say, well, Joseph didn't do it right, or Joseph messed up, or this is what it was supposed to be. I don't think he messed up. What I believe reading through this, what I don't see is him going to God, how do I lead these people? Instead was, how do I take all I can from these people? So you might be thinking, okay, so how do you know that there's something wrong here? And this is that weird part that David read at the end here. Jacob, his father, had been around for over 17 years in Egypt now. And as they've been down there and seeing all these things and enjoying life and seeing what's now happened after the famine, because this is now years after, Jacob realizes, where's all the people still living? All his people, the family, in that nice land. They're enjoying all this prosperity. They're enjoying having these things. And Jacob's response is, we need to get back to the land of our fathers. This is not right that we've been staying here. And he goes to Joseph, not Reuben the oldest, not Judah, the one who was that brother who spoke up last week. He goes to Joseph, and he has this weird thing where he puts his hand on his thigh. But what he's saying to Joseph, swear to me, give me this oath, that when I die, you will bury me with my father. We need to go back. Something's not right here. And again, the reason why I'm bringing this up as we read this text is because the beginning of Exodus, the first verse, a time came when Pharaoh no longer knew Joseph. The actions that are happening here will lead to the Egyptian people overthrowing Pharaoh and enslaving the very people who are enjoying good things right now. So why are we looking at this and bringing this up? Because we actually look at other leaders throughout the Bible, we had these same struggles. Anybody heard of this guy named Moses? He was an emotional guy. In fact, people would argue with him, speak up at him, and what he would do, he'd ask God to wipe him out. But then he'd plead, God, please don't do that. And at one time, he got so angry, he took his stick, his rod, and struck a rock 2 times. Not once, 2 times. And out of that anger, God said, you are no longer going to be in the promised land. There's a guy named Saul. He's a king. There's a king named David, his son Solomon. Men who were supposed to be the leaders, like Joseph, relied on their heart, relied on their talents, didn't seek God's advice, and trouble happened. But it's not just in the Old Testament. There's this guy named Peter. You ever heard of Peter? The actual name Simon Peter. He would speak up a lot wrongly. In fact, at one point, the leader of the disciples, Jesus said this to him, get behind me, Satan. Because Peter focused on his heart, on his talents, to tell Jesus, don't do this. There's this missionary named Paul who ended up writing a lot of our New Testament. He wanted to go in different places. You know what God said? Not here. But come over to Macedonia. Come over to Europe. So the question is then, if the whole point of what we're looking here, as we're leading, as we're guiding, as we're relying on our talents, it's easy to see how those can sometimes hinder us or keep us from making the right decision. So what do we do? What we do is we do then go to God in prayer. Now, the spiritual term for that word is called discernment. And you can discern things by reading the Bible, going to God in prayer, talking to fellow people here at Southlake to talk through decisions. Look to see, are you acting out of emotions? Are you acting the way who you are? Or is God leading this? And who's the best example to look at leading and developing through a tragedy? Any guesses what name would be a good example? Well, Job's a good one. Yeah, Jesus. Throughout the New Testament, again and again, before Jesus taught with people, before Jesus did something big, you know what? There's this phrase that always picks up. It says he would go to a quiet and desolate place to pray. We don't see that kind of leadership through Joseph here, but we see it in Jesus. In fact, today in our Bible study, Mark actually taught about the Lord's Prayer. And the reason why that gets brought up, because the disciples saw this different kind of leadership from Jesus, where he spent more time praying than doing. And they wanted to learn how to do it. On the night before Jesus, actually the night he was betrayed, before he was taken and put on a cross to die for us, he spent time doing what? Praying. And he even said to the Lord, Father, take this cup from me. Don't let this happen. But if this is your will, let it be done. My encouragement for you as we're looking at this and seeing who Jesus is through this is that as we are working through things in our life, have those curveballs. Those times when you step up in leadership, rely on the gifts God has given you, but take a deep breath and ask the question, is this God's will or my own? In the story of Joseph, we see how Joseph takes care of everybody, but as we'll go to see, this comes at a great cost. In the words of Martin Luther, to close up here, he would say that if he had a normal routine, would spend an hour in praying. I do not spend an hour in praying, so I'm not sharing this to say this is what I do too, but Luther made a point he would pray for an hour. But if he had a busy day, he'd pray for 3 hours. But the idea is taking time, trusting on our Lord to be with him. And I share that with you using Jesus as the example of living that out for us to live it too. So as you leave here today and those things that you are dealing with, yes, use the gifts that God's given you. But before you speak or before you act, take a moment and talk with him. Because he is your Father and you are his child. Amen?